inevitable moment when my voice cracks like a 15-year-old boy. I have a little bit of laryngitis here, so hopefully you guys are all able to hear me. So I'm here to talk to you about empowering the individual, and specifically what I mean by that, how do we empower individuals to work with data in a world where data is shifting to the cloud? In enterprises today, the nature of data is changing. It's becoming more decentralized. We've heard a lot about it in some of the speakers today. How do you empower individuals who have more access to data in more places than ever before? This is such a fundamental shift that in some respects we need to rethink how we empower those individuals. We need to make sure that we're giving them the tools and the processes to be successful in this new world. So, if we think about data, for the better part of the last 20 years, the server has been the focal point of data analysis. The entire BI industry and the data analytics industry has been focused on centralized on-premise data. Many of the speakers today you've been hearing from have been talking about how we make sense of that data. With data volumes increasing, the movement from the EDW to larger big data stores, MPP systems, Hadoop, and the like, there's a lot of challenges going on there. And so for the last 5 years, the data industry in general has been focused on big data, and rightfully so. But in the meanwhile, there's been another transition happening, something that has the potential to be even more seismic in its impact on the enterprise, and that's the shift to the cloud. So while data volumes have been increasing, what we've seen is the movement of a lot of services that we rely on in enterprises into the cloud. And overwhelmingly, these services don't tend to be across the entire organization. Yes, we move certain CRM and ERP systems into the cloud for cost savings reasons. What we're seeing today is an overwhelming movement of departmental, work group, and even individual functions into the cloud. So we have users who are using all of these different tools that are no longer within the walls of the enterprise. In fact, for the first time in arguably the last 20 years, we've had a net movement of data out of the enterprise instead of into the enterprise. So instead of data coming inside its walls and becoming more centralized, all of a sudden we're having to deal with data flowing outside the walls of the enterprise. Now, overwhelmingly when we think about external data, and historically when we think of external data, we think about it as a dimensional aspect of centralized data. So when we build systems to work with data in the cloud, historically we've always thought about it as augmenting the data that sits in our centralized servers. How do you take that Salesforce data, build an ETL system, bring it into the walls of the enterprise so that we can augment the EDW or the Hadoop data so that we can get more value out of it. What you're seeing today with the next generation of EDW players is systems that are trying to make it easier to do that. Companies like Good Data, who are an online EDW product where they've made integration with cloud services a first-class player. We're also hearing from a lot of companies that are trying to overlay existing on-premise systems. So in a little while you'll hear from Sharmila from ClearStory Data, and she'll tell you about how they try to unify all of the data in the organization to make it easier for you to augment your Hadoop data with data that is in, say, public data stores. And all of this is fine so long as the focal point of your analysis is the centralized data. But what if it's not? I mentioned earlier that individuals in the organization are now getting direct access to data like never before. And suddenly we're seeing users who, they've got access to Marketo, they've got access to MailChimp, they've got access to Google Analytics. They want to work with that data in order to get insights into their mailing campaign. Or folks in product who use Zendesk and Yammer and GitHub. Or Salesforce and Pardot and ExactTarget, where the users have direct access to the data and they're not actually interested in the data that is resident on your central stores. This is where a new category of BI products is starting to emerge, a product line where the intersection of the user and the cloud is the focal point. So the old model of pulling the data down and bringing it from a cloud-based system into a data warehouse really doesn't work in this case for 3 reasons. First and foremost, it's not scalable. If it takes you 30, 60 days to roll out an ETL system to bring one cloud data source into your corporate environment, how are you going to do that for dozens or hundreds? Along with that, it's not cost effective, right? many of these services, as I mentioned, are only being used by departments or a handful of people. So, it's really, really difficult for organizations to justify the costs associated with a custom integration for something that might only benefit a handful of users across 1,000 or 10,000 person enterprise. And third, it doesn't reflect the paradigm that the user is thinking about. So, if the paradigm of data analysis places the centralized data as the focal point, it doesn't make a lot of sense to pull all this cloud data down, present it back to the users in a way where it's augmenting that data, when in fact the way the user's thinking about it is, look, I just want to ask questions of these cloud-based data sources, and your centralized data that's so important to the BI team, it's not something that's on my radar. So this new category of products is aiming to empower individual users to work directly with cloud data that they have access to. And when I say access means something very different in this world. It doesn't mean all of the data has been pulled into a SQL database or a NoSQL database so that it can be exposed through a tool. Access means logins. Cloud services today, almost all of them have APIs that are exposed to their users. So if you have a login to Salesforce, you have access to the data. If you have a login to Yammer, you have access to the data. What's been missing is tools to enable those users who have access to be able to work with that data. My company, DataHero, is one of the first companies to take a look at this from a BI perspective. We are the first BI platform that is designed to enable users to analyze and make sense of data entirely from SaaS-based services. In fact, we're the first freemium BI product ever. So business users literally go to our website, sign up, create an account, connect to services they use, and they can start getting answers. They don't have to go to IT. They don't have to figure out an ETL process. But we're not the only ones doing this. There's a number of companies that are taking this approach by focusing on SaaS data as the first-class citizen. There's a company called StatWing that's doing this for statisticians. There's a company called Sunwall out of New York that's doing this for e-commerce data sets. And the prevailing approach and the paradigm is, we want to empower those users to be able to work with data on their own directly and without having to, go through IT and go through traditional processes. And all of these companies are seeing widespread adoption across different verticals, different industries, different job functions, even different company sizes. So, in the case of DataHero, we have users at small startups. We have users in almost every Fortune 500. We have users in every industry, job function around the world. We have paying customers who are individual consultants, and we have customers who work at large companies like Google and Dun & Bradstreet and HP. All of these being companies that have significant investment in data and analytics infrastructure. And one of the key things here is that this new class of BI products is not something that's competitive to the old way of thinking. Products like, these centralized stores, they're still incredibly important because we still need to make sense of that big data. But at the same time, we want to empower these new users who suddenly have access to their data, and we want them to be more effective and more efficient. And the net benefit to enterprises is just that. The benefit of using systems like this is that you can empower your employees, you can make your entire organization more efficient. So suddenly your business user is more efficient because they're able to go directly to the data source themselves, do analytics, get answers, and move on with their day, instead of what they're doing now, which is either ignoring the data, downloading the data in Excel and trying to hack their way around it, or going and grabbing their nearest business analyst and saying, hey, can you help me with this? These products are also making entire organizations more efficient because your high-value data analysts, BI analysts, and data scientists can focus on making sense of the big data that they were hired to make sense of, rather than spending half their time making charts and pivot tables for the VP who yells the loudest. So most of today you're going to hear about big data, and you're going to hear about the importance of big data, and rightfully so. But at the same time, I urge you to notice what's going on with the cloud, pay attention to some of these services that are coming around, and think about ways that you can empower not only the employees who need to make sense of the centralized data, but also the employees who have access to SaaS data and cloud-based services and want to work with that data today. So my name is Chris Neumann. DataHero, as I said, is the first freemium BI product. Try it, sign up, create an account, and if you have any feedback, chris@datahero.com. Thank you so much.